Keanu Reeves entered the boardroom clad in a faded hoodie and an old baseball cap. To most in the room, he appeared to be a man who had mistakenly taken the wrong elevator to the wrong floor. One executive, failing to recognize him, asked him to leave. He didn't argue. Instead, he took a seat and allowed her to dig her own grave, one polished sentence at a time. When the truth finally emerged, the silence that followed was louder than any speech she had ever delivered. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching this video from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. We'd love to know where our quiet listeners are tuning in from. New York buzzed with its usual rhythm. Cabs cut corners as if they owned the streets. Espresso machines hissed behind frosted glass storefronts, and the sidewalks moved as if being late was a universal affliction. At the corner of 47th and Park, just outside a quaint cafe with fogged-up windows and handwritten chalk specials, a man stood still, oddly calm amid the rush. His hoodie was zipped halfway, the fabric worn and soft. He wore dark jeans, broken sneakers, and a navy baseball cap, the kind that held stories folded into its creases. His face was partly shaded, partly obscured by the low curve of the brim. Keanu Reeves lifted a steaming cup of black coffee to his lips, his fingers tightening slightly around the warmth. His eyes scanned the street, not searching but observing, like one might study a painting they had seen 1,000 times yet still found something new in. Just as he stepped sideways, instinctively making room for an elderly woman maneuvering her walker past a curb, a door slammed behind him. Hard, fast heels struck the pavement like hammers. Out of my way. Before he could even turn, a blur of motion and perfume collided with his side. His coffee jolted, his elbow twitched, and then a black arc of liquid shot through the air in a perfect tragic curve, landing squarely across a woman's blush-pink blazer and cream silk blouse. The splatter pattern was immediate and merciless, shoulder to chest, like a spilled midnight. Gasps came from someone behind, and a pedestrian slowed, sensing the drama. In the middle of it all stood Isabel Fletcher, staring at the mess as if it had just insulted her lineage. "You," her voice was clipped, icy, lethal. "Are you kidding me?" Keanu instinctively took a step back. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't see you." Isabel lifted both hands in disbelief, staring at the wet stain blooming across her tailored jacket. "Oh my God, this!" She exhaled sharply through her nose. "This is silk. Do you know what that means?" "Of course you don't." Keanu offered a napkin from his back pocket. "It was an accident." She didn't take it, didn't even look at it. "Do you always stand in the middle of the sidewalk holding hot liquids like a lost tourist?" Her eyes scanned him with surgical precision. "No briefcase, no badge. Let me guess, you're delivering something or just loitering until someone pays you to move along." Keanu didn't react as most would. He held her gaze steady but not confrontational. "I was letting someone pass behind me," he said, his voice low and even. "Didn't expect anyone to come from the side at full speed." Isabel laughed once, a short, sharp exhale. "Right, my fault for walking like someone who has somewhere important to be." She stepped back to inspect the damage again. The blotch had already begun to dry into the fabric, dark and unforgiving. With a grimace, she pulled a silk scarf from her bag and dabbed at the spot, mostly for show. "Here's some advice," she said coolly. "Next time you come into Midtown dressed like that, at least try not to spill on people who actually belong here." Keanu let the silence settle, then with a polite nod he said, "Hope your meeting goes better than your morning." Her head tilted slightly, as if the words had landed wrong. More calm than she expected, more measured than she could mock. But pride demanded the last word. "Don't worry," she said, tossing the soiled napkin into a nearby trash can. "This will be the worst thing that happens to me today." He turned on his heel and marched toward the rotating doors of the Heiress building, straightening her jacket as if brushing off the entire encounter. Keanu didn't follow her with his eyes. Instead, he took another small sip of his coffee, set the cup down beside a planter, and looked up at the glass tower above. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not cruel, not smug. The worst thing that would happen to Isabel Fletcher today hadn't even started yet. The marble lobby of Eris & Co. stretched like a cathedral. Glass, steel, and ego arranged in perfect symmetry. Morning light poured in through two-story windows, bouncing off polished floors and gleaming security desks. Everything smelled like money. New carpet, fresh coffee, and the faint trace of designer perfume trailing behind passing heels. Keanu Reeves, still in his worn hoodie and navy cap, stepped through the rotating door and was immediately swallowed by the blur of briefcases and badge scanners. He moved with quiet confidence, not slouched or uncertain, but unassuming, invisible by design. A security guard at the reception desk glanced up, did a double take, then looked back down at the clipboard. "Excuse me, sir, are you looking for someone?" the guard asked, stepping out from behind the desk with mild concern. Keanu reached into his pocket and produced a folded sheet of paper. Simple, no logos, just a name and a barcode. The guard scanned it. There was a pause, a blink, then the light on the scanner turned green. The screen lit up. "Access granted, authorization level executive clearance." The guard's posture shifted immediately. You're good to go. Elevators to the left, top floor." Keanu gave a polite nod and walked on, leaving behind a slightly puzzled silence. As he stepped into the elevator, a woman in a navy pencil skirt and sharp-rimmed glasses gave him a sidelong glance, her brow furrowed. Then she leaned toward the man beside her and whispered, "He looks just like Keanu Reeves." The man snorted. "Sure, and I'm Brad Pitt. Come on, nobody like that walks around alone." And in that moment, it was probably some guy from maintenance. They both laughed under their breath. The elevator dinged, and Keanu stepped out alone at the top floor. The executive wing of Eris was a different beast. Quieter, colder, the kind of place where voices rarely rose above a practiced murmur, and every chair cost more than a month's rent in Queens. Inside conference room Orion, the table stretched long and lacquered, surrounded by black leather chairs and nervous ambition. Screens flickered with charts and talking points. Staff buzzed around, preparing for the 9 a.m. strategy meeting with the rumored new investor. At the center of it all stood Isabel Fletcher, now wearing a blazer buttoned over her stained blouse, a silk scarf artfully concealing most of the damage. She was giving orders like a conductor prepping a symphony of self-importance. "I want projection screens up in 5, she snapped. "The data flow has to be tight, and where's catering? Do not let anyone put croissants with the savory trays. I swear if I see carbs next to prosciutto again." The doors opened, and Keanu entered, causing time to hiccup. The intern by the printer froze mid-step. A junior manager nearly dropped her tablet. Isabel turned, recognizing him instantly from the cafe, and stiffened like a cat spotting a rat in its penthouse. "You," she said, loud enough to slice the room. "What are you doing here?" Keanu stopped just inside the door, scanning the room, not with arrogance, but with quiet curiosity. "I have a meeting," he said simply. Isabel scoffed, stepping forward as if about to shoo a child out of an art gallery. "With who?" "This floor is restricted to executive personnel and our investors team. You're clearly neither." A few people shifted in their seats. Murmurs flitted like ghosts across the room. Keanu didn't react. "I was invited." Isabel raised an eyebrow. "Invited by whom?" "Your reflection." The comment landed with an uncomfortable thud. Several heads turned toward the screens, pretending to study slides that weren't yet on. Then one of the junior analysts, a young man in a checkered blazer, leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "He really does look like Keanu Reeves." The neighbor replied, "Even if it was him, which it's not, what would he be doing here? We're talking equity, not autographs." Meanwhile, Isabel folded her arms and gave Keanu a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I think you've wandered into the wrong boardroom, mister." Keanu looked at her, his voice as calm as morning rain. "Let's just say I'm here to listen. And let's just say I'm about 30 seconds away from calling security." She snapped back. But before she could move, the doors behind Keanu opened once more. A man in a suit stepped in, crisp and polished. carrying the air of someone who managed billions, not budgets. It was Harold Flint, senior managing partner from the investment bank overseeing Valaris' buyout deal. He stopped cold when he saw Keanu, then smiled. "Mr. Reeves," he said warmly, "glad you made it. We're right on time." Isabel's jaw didn't drop, but it cracked invisibly at the hinges. The room turned to stone. Keanu smiled back. "Morning, Harold." The silence that followed could have sliced glass. If you're a fan of Keanu Reeves and the quiet, powerful way he shows kindness in everything he does, drop a number 9 in the comments. For a long, breathless moment, no one in the room moved. Isabel's eyes remained fixed on Harold Flint, hoping desperately, silently, that she had misheard, that he had called the man standing in the doorway something else, that this was all a coincidence. But it wasn't. Harold strode over to Keanu, offered a firm handshake, and gestured toward the boardroom table like a master welcoming a VIP guest. "We've got everything set up," he said. "Let's get you settled before we begin." Keanu nodded politely, stepped forward, and pulled out a chair halfway down the table. Not at the head, not in the spotlight, but close enough to be impossible to ignore. The atmosphere shifted like a slow pressure system rolling in from nowhere. People adjusted in their seats. One in turn suddenly pulled out her phone under the table and began typing "Keanu Reeves investor Valaris rumor" into a search bar. Isabel, however, was not so easily displaced. She moved toward Harold with a tight-lipped smile, as if about to correct a clerical error. "Sorry, Harold, did you say Mr. Reeves, as in Keanu Reeves, the actor?" Harold looked up from his tablet, calm and unconcerned. "Yes, Isabel, that Keanu Reeves. He's the principal behind the consortium we discussed, the one buying us out." Her voice hitched half a note too high. "That's right." There was a strange pause. Not relief, not excitement, something colder. Isabel turned her gaze back to Keanu, as though trying to redraw his face in her mind, matching it to some outdated mental file labeled celebrity instead of threat. Then she laughed too loudly, too suddenly. "Oh well, this is unexpected." Keanu looked at her, not with hostility, not with triumph, just stillness. "Yes," he said softly, "I've heard that a lot lately." Harold, oblivious to the undertow rippling through the table, continued. "Mr. Reeves is particularly interested in observing how Valaris functions internally. He requested to sit in today without formal announcement. So please proceed as you would any other meeting." That sentence landed like a trap snapping shut. Isabel's face didn't twitch, but something behind her eyes did. She gave a crisp nod, smoothed her blazer, and turned to the screen at the head of the room. "Of course, let's begin the presentation." The lights dimmed, and a sleek corporate template appeared on the screen, followed by a title slide. "Valaris Strategic Vision Post-Restructure Initiative," as Isabel began her pitch. Her voice returned to its usual sharp rhythm. "What Valaris needs," she said, "is not just capital. It's discipline, leadership that knows when to trim the fat, to elevate image, to ensure that what we put forward represents power, polish, and precision." Keanu sat quietly, hands folded in front of him, not blinking. She clicked to the next slide, an org chart. There are redundancies in middle management, a bloated comms department, and frankly, a lack of alignment between public-facing roles and the brand image we're trying to restore. Her eyes flicked toward Keanu for just a fraction of a second. "I'm talking about standards," she continued. "About making sure that when someone walks into this company, be they client, partner, or press, they see a culture of excellence, not..." She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone felt the pause, the implication, "not people like him." The room was painfully quiet. Even Harold had stopped scrolling his tablet. Keanu leaned back slightly in his chair. Still no reaction, still no smile. Isabel cleared her throat and clicked again. "Our media strategy will focus on revitalizing the brand through sleek imagery, curated press interactions, and above all, by protecting who and what we align ourselves with." She didn't look at him this time. She didn't dare. When she finished, there was a flicker of polite applause. Brief, unsure. Harold offered a single nod. The silence afterward felt raw. Then someone from legal, A woman in her early 40s with keen eyes and a trembling pen raised her hand. "Mr. Reeves," she said cautiously, "would you care to offer any preliminary thoughts?" All eyes turned, breath held. Keanu sat forward, no rush, no tension. He looked at Isabel, then at the table, and then he said softly without lifting his voice, "I appreciate clarity and leadership, I really do." A pause, but sometimes people mistake clarity for control and control for character. He let the words hang in the air, light but heavy in impact. Isabel's hand tightened around her laser pointer. No one breathed. Keanu leaned back again. "That's all," he said. "Still here with us. If you've made it this far, that means the story spoke to you in some way. Drop a number 6 in the comments to let us know you're still here, watching, listening, and feeling it with us. We see you, and we're glad you stayed." The meeting resumed, at least on the surface. Charts changed, voices resumed, but the energy in the room had shifted. Subtle at first, like a temperature drop you don't notice until your fingers start to tense. Isabel stood near the screen, posture perfect, eyes flicking between bullet points, but her voice, always so composed, so razor-sharp, had acquired something unexpected, hesitation, not in content, in tone. She sensed it too. Keanu hadn't challenged her, hadn't raised his voice, corrected her facts, or dismissed her pitch, but somehow, in just 2 sentences, he told the room something she never meant to reveal, that her authority was brittle, conditional, performative. And worse, others had heard it from across the table. Brian Patel, Senior VP of Product Development, who rarely spoke during strategy briefings, leaned forward slightly in his chair and began taking actual notes, something he hadn't done in the last 3 meetings. Next to him, Jasmine Lee, Marketing Director, glanced at Keanu, then at Isabel, then looked away, but not before a tiny smirk betrayed her thoughts. The intern stopped pretending to take notes altogether. They were now quietly Googling Keanu Reeves heiress under the table. Isabel clicked through another slide. "Our international strategy is focused on expanding brand identity into emerging tech platforms with curated partnerships to reinforce control over messaging and brand equity." She delivered it cleanly, but there was no rhythm to her words now, no fire, just well-rehearsed syllables landing on unconvincing ground. Across the table, Keanu said nothing. He simply watched. Harold Flint, oblivious or pretending to be, chimed in. "It's a solid plan, Isabel. Let's go around and hear what everyone thinks." Brian glanced up, a little caught off guard. "Yeah, it's tight, slick, but maybe a bit image forward." Isabel blinked. "Image is forward in this climate. Perception is reality." Brian hesitated. "Sure, but maybe not when it starts erasing substance. I mean, part of what we used to pride ourselves on at Valeris was authenticity, right? We weren't curated, we were trusted." The room grew still again. Isabel's smile flickered. Jasmine leaned in. "Actually, I think Brian's onto something. If we start measuring our people by how glossy they look on a banner ad, we're going to alienate the very voices we say we want to elevate." Keanu tilted his head slightly, eyes never leaving Isabel. She stepped back from the screen slowly, remote still in hand. "Let me be clear," she said carefully. "This isn't about silencing voices. It's about shaping how we appear to the world. There's a difference." Keanu's voice broke the moment like a quiet knife. "There is." She turned toward him, instinct tightening behind her eyes. But when shaping becomes shaving, soon there's nothing left to recognize or respect. His words weren't directed only at her. They were for the room, but she heard them louder than anyone else because in that moment, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt full of thought, of doubt, of things beginning to shift. And it was then, only then, that Isabel realized something she hadn't felt in years. She was no longer the most listened to voice in the room. On the surface, it was a chance to stretch legs, refill coffee, check messages. But underneath the clinks of ceramic cups and the muted sounds of typing, a different current was moving. Low, steady, and dangerous to anyone who had once commanded the room without question. Isabel didn't speak as she stepped out of the conference room. Her heels struck the floor sharply, too sharply, echoing down the corridor like someone trying to outrun her own pulse. Her scarf, still perfectly knotted over the fading coffee stain, fluttered as she turned the corner and disappeared into the executive lounge. Inside, she stared into the mirror above the marble sink. The silk around her neck was flawless, the makeup untouched, the blazer pressed, but something was slipping, not from her wardrobe, from her grip. Her hand,